I spent a decade building our firm's most valuable client relationship, only for a new executive to call my life's work Fluff. He wanted to shine solo, so I stepped back and let him walk into a buzzsaw he never saw coming. This is where the story truly begins, and you won't want to miss what happens. Make sure you're subscribed to see it through to the end. We're always curious. Where in the world are you all watching from today? Let us know in the comments. I knew I was watching a corporate car crash in slow motion the moment Jard walked into the conference room. He was our new chief marketing officer, a man whose teeth were so blindingly white they could likely signal ships in a dense fog, and whose suit was tailored within an inch of its life. He didn't just enter a room, he invaded it, bringing with him a cloud of expensive cologne and the overwhelming energy of a man who had never been told no in his entire life. He stood at the head of the mahogany table, looking down at the quarterly insights deck my team had spent 6 weeks perfecting. This wasn't just a slide show. It was 20 years of decoding product-market fit, analyzing supply chain volatility, and rigorous trend modeling for Cryon Tech, our firm's crown jewel account. It was a document built on blood, sweat, and skipped vacations. Jard picked up the glossy printout, flipped through 2 pages, and then dropped it back onto the table with a dismissive slap that echoed like a gunshot in the silent room. "This," he said, sniffing slightly as if the data offended his olfactory senses, "is PowerPoint fluff. It's not wrong exactly, it just lacks context, it's dense, it's heavy, it's fluff." The silence that followed was absolute. Around the table, my analytics crew, people with PhDs in data science, people who could model a market crash before Wall Street woke up, froze. Ashwin, my lead data architect, stared at his laptop screen, his knuckles turning white as he gripped the edge of the desk. Stacy, who had pulled 3 all-nighters to get the predictive overlays correct, stopped clicking her pen. I felt a cold, sharp knot form in the center of my chest. "Fluff?" I asked, keeping my voice even, though my pulse was thumping against my collarbone. "Jard, that deck outlines a $30 million revenue stream. It details the exact hardware security protocols Cryon Tech needs for their Q4 rollout. It's the blueprint for their entire fiscal year." Jard waved a hand dismissively, a gesture that suggested my words were nothing more than annoying gnats he was swatting away. He leaned back against the whiteboard, crossing his ankles, oozing the confidence of a guy who had once been voted most likely to disrupt in an executive MBA group chat and had never let it go. Alina, he said, shaking his head with a pitying smile. "You're thinking in the weeds, I'm talking about the sky. You're giving me algebra, I need poetry. This thing needs vision. You've got charts, sure. But where's the narrative? Where's the why? We need to inspire them, not bore them to death with procurement stats." He looked around the room, making eye contact with the junior associates, bypassing the seniors entirely. "Don't worry," he said, clapping me on the shoulder with a familiarity that made my skin crawl. "I'll lead the Cryon Tech presentation tomorrow. We're going to strip this down, simplify, make it pop." He didn't know, he couldn't possibly know, he didn't know that Cryon Tech wasn't just a client. It was a $30 million behemoth with claws in AI procurement and enough legal red tape to strangle a mid-sized law firm. He didn't know that their leadership team didn't buy poetry. They bought survival. They bought accuracy. "Jard," I tried one last time, my voice dropping an octave, "the client expects the technical deep dive. If we go in there with high-level concepts, they will eat us alive." He chuckled, grabbing his iced coffee. "Let me worry about the client, Alina. You just worry about making sure the font sizes match. Sometimes you have to drag the old guard into the future, kicking and screaming." He winked at me, actually winked. Then he grabbed the USB drive containing our work, slid it into his pocket, and strutted out of the room. The door clicked shut behind him, leaving me standing there, humiliated in front of the team I had spent years protecting. The betrayal wasn't just in his dismissal of the work, it was in the casual cruelty of it. It was worse than a bad review or a budget cut. It was the complete erasure of competence. The humiliation didn't end in the conference room. It followed me back to my office, lingering like a bad smell. I sat at my desk, staring at the dual monitors that displayed the complex, beautiful data models Jard had just called Fluff. My hands were trembling, not from fear, but from a rage so hot it felt like it could melt the keyboard. My team was paralyzed. Stacy knocked on my door frame 10 minutes later, her face pale. "Elena," she whispered, stepping inside and closing the door behind her. "Is he serious? Is he actually going to scrap the predictive overlays? The client specifically asked for that risk assessment." "He's serious," I said, rubbing my temples. "He thinks big arrows and stock photos of people shaking hands are going to close a hardware security contract." "We have to stop him," she said, panic rising in her voice. "If we lose Cryon Tech, that's half the department's budget. That's jobs, Elena, my job." "I know," I said, trying to project a calm I didn't feel. "Let me handle it. I'll send an email. I'll try to get through to him." But before I could even draft a message, my Outlook pinged. A calendar update. Subject: updated invite. Cryon Tech pitch Q4 strategy organizer. Jard Thorne role change. Elena Vance, optional/visual support. I stared at the screen. Visual support. The phrase hung there, mocking me. Translation: make the slides pretty and don't speak unless spoken to. It was a demotion in everything but title. I had been the lead strategist on this account for 7 years. I had shepherded Cryon Tech from its first awkward pilot project to becoming our most reliable stream of revenue. I had eaten airport tuna sandwiches for this client. I had hand-walked a vice president through a GDPR nightmare at 3:00 a.m. on a Sunday while my own family slept. And now I was visual support. I stood up and walked to the window, looking out over the city skyline. It was raining, gray streaks running down the glass, distorting the world outside. My reflection stared back, a woman of 45 who had climbed every rung of the corporate ladder with grit and precision, now being told to sit down and shut up by a man whose tie cost more than my first car. I went to the break room to get water, needing to cool down. As I turned the corner near the coffee station, I heard his voice. Jard was holding court with 2 of the new sales hires, leaning against the counter. "Yeah, the analytics team is solid, but they're dinosaurs," Jard was saying, his voice carrying that booming, performative quality. "They're in the weeds. Sometimes the old guard needs to be put out to pasture to make room for real innovation. You know, you have to trim the fat." One of the new hires laughed, a nervous, sycophantic sound. "Total reset," the kid agreed. I froze, put out to pasture, trim the fat. I didn't storm in. I didn't throw my water in his face. I didn't scream. A younger version of me might have. The version of me that still believed fairness was a corporate value might have demanded an apology. But I had been in this game too long. I knew that screaming only made you look emotional, and emotional was the death knell for a female executive. Instead, I turned around silently and walked back to my office. I closed the door and locked it. I sat down, breathed in for 4 counts, held for 4, and exhaled for 4. Then, I reached down and opened the bottom drawer of my filing cabinet. It was the drawer where I kept the things that actually mattered, not the HR handbooks or the quarterly swag, but the leverage. I pulled out a notebook with a cracked leather cover. It smelled of old paper and ink. I flipped past years of notes until I found a specific tab, Miranda C. What Jard didn't realize, what he couldn't have realized because he never bothered to ask, was that the Cryon Tech CTO, the one he was so excited to impress with his vision, was Miranda Chen. And Miranda was the reason I had a career. But more importantly, I knew exactly what made Miranda tick. I knew her pet peeves, I knew her triggers, and I knew that she had an almost violent allergic reaction to Fluff. Jard thought he was walking into a sales pitch. He didn't know he was walking into a minefield. And for the first time all day, a cold, hard smile touched my lips. He had forgotten one crucial thing. In data, the error is always in the assumptions. To understand why Jard was digging his own grave, you have to understand Miranda Chen. The first time I met her, I was 23, fresh out of college, and stupid enough to think that memorizing a spreadsheet made me an expert. Miranda was already a legend by then, the newly appointed CTO of a Fortune 100 company known for firing vendors mid-conference call if they tried to mansplain latency issues to her. I was the junior analyst on a cross-functional nightmare project with a name like Next Horizon Synergies, which is corporate speak for, we don't know what this is, but someone promised the board we'd do it. Everyone senior to me was too terrified to present our janky prototype to her. So, like lambs offering a sacrifice, they shoved me in front of her because I smiled a lot and hadn't yet been crushed by the industry. I stood at the head of the table in a skirt suit that was ill-fitting and uncomfortable, fumbling with my notes. I stuttered. I almost said bandwidth penetration when I meant network bottleneck. I was drowning. Mid-sentence, Miranda raised her hand. She didn't shout. She just said, "Stop." I froze. I thought that was it. Career over. Back to living in my parents' basement. But she didn't fire me. She leaned forward, her eyes sharp and terrifyingly intelligent behind her rimless glasses. "You're talking like a white paper, Alina," she said. "What do you actually mean?" I blinked, sweat trickling down my back. I mean, if we don't fix the sync issue, the system will crash when more than 10 clients log in at once. "Good," she said, sitting back. "Then say that. Never hide the problem behind jargon. If you can't explain it simply, you don't understand it. And if you try to sell me something you don't understand, I will destroy you." She took over the whiteboard and had me talk while she drew. Boxes, arrows, cycles. She narrated back to me what I had been trying to say. It was the first time I understood that being smart wasn't enough. You had to translate. You had to make it land. She called it strategic translation. Over the next decade, she became my compass. She never gave hugs. She never told me I was doing amazing, sweetie. But she trusted me. She gave me real work. She let me sit in on contract reviews and watch how she disarmed smug executives with a single question. What problem are we solving, exactly? We once spent 6 straight hours on a hotel floor in Atlanta reworking a supply chain integration. She ordered fries, not salad. She swore like a sailor when the data broke. And when I got promoted to director, she emailed me a single line, "Keep your knives sharp. They're not done testing you." I still have that email. Back in the present, I stared at that cracked leather notebook. I thought of Miranda, and then I thought of Jard. Jard, who is currently pacing around the office like a motivational speaker with an invisible microphone. I could see him through the glass walls of the conference room, gesturing wildly to his assistant. He was polished, handsome in a generic way, and utterly hollow. He was the kind of man who failed upwards because he looked the part. He spoke in buzzwords because he lacked the intellect to speak in facts. He was the exact opposite of everything Miranda respected. He poked his head into my office later that afternoon. "Hey, Alina, just wanted to loop back. I've finalized the deck. I cut about 80% of those charts. Too cluttered. We're going with a data as destiny theme, very high level, very emotional." "Miranda Chen isn't an emotional buyer, Jard," I said, giving him one last chance. "She's a technical CTO. She wants to see the architecture." He laughed, a dismissive bark of sound. "Everyone is an emotional buyer, Alina. You just have to find the right trigger. Trust me, I know how to handle women like her. You just have to make them feel heard, then dazzle them with the big picture." Women like her. The misogyny was subtle, wrapped in corporate confidence, but it was there. He didn't see a CTO, he saw a woman he could charm. He didn't see a technical expert, he saw an audience. "Okay, Jard," I said, forcing my face into a mask of professional compliance. "You're the CMO, it's your show." "That's the spirit." He pointed a finger gun at me. "I'm going to need you to run the slides tomorrow. Just keep up with my flow. I like to improvise, so stay sharp." "I'll be ready," I said. He walked away, humming to himself. I waited until he was gone. Then, I pulled out my personal cell phone. I didn't use the company email. I didn't use Slack. I went to my encrypted messaging app and found the number I hadn't used in 2 years. I typed one sentence, heads up. I wasn't allowed to vet the deck, expect fluff. I stared at it. It was brief. Ambiguous enough to keep plausible deniability if anyone ever saw it. Honest enough to mean everything. I hit send. 3 minutes passed, then a reply pinged through. Noted. That was it, no emojis, no punctuation. But I could hear her voice in that word, flat, unreadable, and loaded like a round chambered quietly in a boardroom revolver. I exhaled. The gears were turning. I was no longer angry. I was ready. Let Jard ride into battle in his shiny LinkedIn armor. Let him hold court with his future state synergies and data as destiny slides. Miranda would smell the nonsense before he clicked the second bullet point. And when she did, she'd look around that boardroom, straight through the smoke, and remember who taught me to see through it, too. I didn't reply to Jard's visual support invite with a fight. I didn't storm into HR to file a grievance about being sidelined on my own account. Instead, I went surgical. There is a specific kind of calm that descends on you when you stop trying to save someone who is determined to jump off a cliff. It's a cold, quiet clarity. I sat in my office, closed blinds, and pulled up the final V2 Jard edits, deck he had saved to the shared drive. It was worse than I imagined. It wasn't just fluff, it was corporate vandalism. He had stripped out the supply chain volatility index, a critical risk assessment tool my team had spent 3 weeks building, and replaced it with a funnel graphic labeled Customer Obsession Zone. The font was wrong. The colors were slightly off-brand. One slide literally said, "Data is the new oil," a phrase so dated it belonged in a 2009 TED Talk, not a Q4 strategy meeting for a tech giant. I had to resist the urge to add a footnote, also the name of my true crime podcast. This was the turning point. This was the moment I shifted from a passive victim of his arrogance into an active strategist of his downfall. My investigation wasn't about finding dirt on Jard's personal life. It was about compiling a forensic record of his professional incompetence. I opened a new folder on my private drive, labeled Insurance. Inside, I began to drag and drop everything. The original deck my team built, the email threads where I explained the importance of the technical specs, the timestamped logs showing Jard deleting the risk models. I wasn't just saving files, I was building a case. I was ensuring that when the inevitable explosion happened, the blast radius would stop exactly at the threshold of my office door. At lunch, I sat in the break room, forcing down a chicken wrap that tasted like cardboard dipped in regret. Across the room, Jard was holding court again. He was pacing around a table of interns, looking like a stock photo of leadership. "You've got to modernize," he was saying, loud enough for the room to hear. "Too many cooks in the data kitchen. We need agility. We need to move fast and break things." Then I heard it again, clear as a bell. Sometimes, you have to realize that experience is just another word for baggage. The intern beside him laughed too hard. Jard slapped the kid's shoulder like a frat brother. I folded my wrap into the trash and walked out. I didn't say a word. I didn't need to. I went back to my desk and opened the cracked leather notebook again. I flipped to a page of handwritten notes from 2011, Cryon Tech's original pilot rollout. There was a sticky note from Miranda pasted there. "You're better at this than you know. One day you'll be running the room, and they won't even realize it until the contract's already signed." I pulled out a pen and added a new note beneath hers. "They still don't realize it." That evening, I got a Teams ping from Jard. "Hey, just looked over the final deck. Nice polish on the transitions. Remember to leave me presenter view tomorrow. Don't want to fumble the flow." I replied with a single thumbs-up emoji. Nothing else. Let him think I was licking his boots. Let him believe I had been neutered. Because if Jard knew anything about Miranda Chen, he would have known one simple fact: she didn't suffer fools. Tomorrow, he was bringing a PowerPoint slingshot to a nuclear strategy meeting. God help him. The room was colder than usual. Boardrooms always are, but Cryon Tech HQ was designed to feel like the inside of a server farm, all polished steel, glass, and Scandinavian silence. It was the kind of place where even the air seemed to be under a non-disclosure agreement. Jard loved it. He strutted in 10 minutes early, flashing veneers and handshakes like a discount game show host. He was wearing a tie that was a shade of purple I found personally offensive. "Miranda," he beamed as she entered, gripping her hand with both of his like she was his long-lost aunt. "So thrilled to be here. Big ideas today. Can't wait to disrupt together." Miranda just blinked at him. She was wearing a sharp charcoal blazer, her hair pulled back in a severe, no-nonsense knot. She looked at his hands engulfing hers, then up at his face. She didn't smile. "Please sit," she said, her voice dry as paper. I took my seat at the far end of the table, opening my laptop. My role, support visuals only. My job was to tap the arrow key every time Jard threw a cue. I was the glorified button pusher. "All right," Jard began, clapping his hands once. "Let's talk vision." He nodded at me. I clicked. Slide 1, a gradient triangle labeled Innovation Stack 2. Jard's baby, not a single metric on it, just verbs in circles. Accelerate, optimize, transform. Slide 2, a timeline that somehow showed revenue tripling without explaining the mechanism of growth. Slide 3, stock images of diverse hands shaking in front of floating binary code. I glanced up. Miranda's expression hadn't changed. She was still blank, still controlled, still watching. But her pen, which usually danced across her notepad taking frantic notes on latency specs, was perfectly still. Jard launched into a monologue about horizontal disruption vectors and next-gen bandwidth loyalty. It was like watching someone try to win a spee. Ling B with made-up words. The Cryon Tech CFO, a man named David who had the sense of humor of a tax audit, scribbled something down. I was fairly certain it was kill me. Then Jard got bold. "We believe your current analytics layer is underleveraged," he said, puffing out his chest. "Our internal estimates project a 4x ROI once we inject our proprietary synergy protocols." I nearly dislocated a rib holding in my snort. Synergy protocols. Miranda adjusted her glasses. She leaned forward just an inch. "Your projections are based on what data set exactly?" This was the trap. She was giving him the rope. Jard beamed. He didn't see the noose. He saw a spotlight. "Well, we built an extrapolative model using a blend of sector benchmarks and sentiment index proxies. It's less about the raw numbers and more about the feeling of the market." That was the moment. That was when I saw it. A flicker. The faintest upturn of Miranda's lip, like someone who just caught a child trying to hide a broken vase behind their back. She nodded slowly. "Proceed." And he did. Oh God, he did. He hit slide 19, the 5 pillars of partner synergy. Jard was sweating now. His upper lip glistened like a glazed ham under studio lighting. The room had turned quiet in that dangerous way, the way a courtroom does when the witness suddenly starts contradicting themselves. I clicked to the next slide, my heart beating like a metronome in my throat. Ping! My laptop made a soft sound, a message notification. I glanced down. It was a private message from Miranda. "Miranda C., he's clueless. I'm pulling the $30M contract. Are you free for lunch tomorrow?" I stared at the screen. For a second, I forgot how to breathe. The words swam before my eyes, pulling the contract. I looked up, neutral face, neutral hands. Jard was still talking, something about aggregated client friction zones. I looked across the table at Miranda. She wasn't even watching him anymore. She was watching me. I tapped the arrow key. Next slide. Jard didn't notice the silent exchange. He was too deep into his own word soup, swimming through nonsense like it was genius. And I sat there in my little corner of the boardroom, silent and still, while Vindication bloomed slow and warm like a sunrise behind my ribs. The elevator ride down was a masterclass in delusion. Jard bounded into the car like he had just secured a billion-dollar acquisition instead of torpedoing a long-standing partnership. "Nailed it," he declared to no one in particular, slapping the brushed metal wall like it owed him a high five. "Did you see how she nodded at the ROI slide? Dead center bulls. That's what clarity looks like, Alina. That's how you sell." He looked at me, eyes gleaming with sweat-slicked victory. "And you, solid clicker work, very fluid, nice rhythm." I gave him a small, tight smile. "Thanks, Jard." That was it, not actually, of course. In my head, I was building a 3-tier cake made of every dumb thing he had just said, ready to serve it cold to whoever asked how the meeting really went. But outwardly, blank slate, quiet as snowfall. "Let's get this baby into post-pitch mode," he said as the doors opened. "We'll loop in branding, get legal to fast-track the new terms. Big win, my friend. Big damn win." He peeled off toward his office, already on a call. "Hey, we're greenlit. Time to scale this sucker up." I walked to my office, shut the door and sat down. Exhaled. 50 minutes later, I got a forwarded email from my friend in procurement at Cryon Tech. Subject: Emergency Internal Strategy Review 2 p.m. Attached was Miranda's calendar invite. Top brass only. I smiled, just a twitch. The kind of grin you allow yourself when the knife hasn't landed yet, but the glint has everyone turning their heads. No message, no reply needed. This was the moment after the trigger is pulled, but before the shot echoes. I spent the afternoon writing up some documentation, not for the company, but for me. I polished off my quarterly metrics and exported a clean version of our predictive engagement model. The one Jard insisted was too complicated to explain. By the time I left, the building was dim and humming. Jard was still in his office, laughing into his AirPods, pacing like a man waiting for a statue to be erected in his honor. He would wake up tomorrow thinking he was a king. He would walk into the strategy review like it was a coronation. And Miranda, she'd be sharpening her blade. The next day, the restaurant was the kind of place where the waiters wore suits better tailored than most CFOs. Soft jazz played somewhere behind a wall of greenery. Miranda was already there, sitting in a sunlit booth by the window, swirling a glass of something French and expensive. She didn't wave. She just tilted her chin slightly, the Miranda equivalent of a bear hug. I slid into the seat across from her. "You're wasted where you are," she said before I even got my coat off. "Good afternoon to you too," I replied, cracking a smile. She sipped her wine. He actually said synergy protocols out loud, like he thinks that's a real thing. You know what I heard during that pitch? "What?" "Nothing," she said. She set her glass down hard. "I heard nothing. No strategy, no awareness, no respect for the client's intelligence. It was like being sold a new religion by a man who didn't believe in gods." The waiter came, she ordered steak. Rare, I followed her lead. She pulled out a sleek black folder and laid it flat between us. "We're rebuilding," she said. "Top to bottom, our digital architecture is bloated. Our roadmaps are fuzzy. I need someone who can translate complexity into clarity and who knows where the bodies are buried." I opened the folder. Inside was an org chart, an implementation timeline, and a contract. It had my name on it, triple my current salary, executive title, direct report to Miranda. "You already wrote the contract?" I asked. She nodded. "I assumed you'd say yes. And if you didn't, then I'd be questioning your intelligence." I laughed genuinely. "This is big." She leaned back. "Bigger if you don't come alone." That pulled me up short. I raised an eyebrow. "I've seen your team's output," she said. "And I've seen what Jard did to it. The good ones will follow you. You trained them. You protected them. Hell, I bet you still bring them snacks when they work late." "Sometimes it's burritos," I said deadpan. "I like burritos," she said, "but I love loyalty. I want your brain, but I also want your gravitational pull. Poach who you need, just keep it quiet." I took a sip of wine. It tasted like leverage. "Give me a week," I said. Miranda took out her phone, typed something, and slid it toward me. It was a screenshot of a Slack message Jard had posted not 30 minutes ago. "Jard CMO, Tech is eating out of our hand. Next stop Q1 expansion baby, synergized data is destiny." I snorted. He's not going to know what hit him. "No," Miranda said, reclaiming her phone. "But he'll feel it, and by then he'll already be irrelevant." I submitted my resignation on a Wednesday morning at 7:12 a.m. There was no fanfare. There was no dramatic marching into the CEO's office to slam a badge on the mahogany desk. Real power doesn't need to make a scene, it just needs to make an exit. I sat in my home office, a mug of coffee steaming beside me, and drafted a plain text email. Subject: formal notice resignation effective immediately. The body was 6 sentences long. I thanked the firm for the opportunities. I noted my appreciation for the team. I listed no reason for leaving. I offered no forwarding address. And most importantly, I didn't CC Jard. I drove to the office 50 minutes later, walking in like it was any other day. I smiled at the receptionist, tapped my badge, and dropped my laptop, along with a neatly labeled USB stick, on the HR director's desk before she had even finished her first yogurt. "My files are clean," I said, my voice calm, devoid of the tremor I expected to feel. "Everything is backed up on SharePoint. The keys are in the bag." She blinked at me, spoon halfway to her mouth. "Oh, okay, is everything?" "Everything is fine," I said. "Goodbye, Karen." I left the building before the rest of the floor filled in. There was no desk cleanout. I had already moved my personal effects slowly over the last 2 weeks. There was no coffee farewell. No corporate eulogy in the general Slack channel with crying emojis and platitudes about next chapters. By noon, I was a ghost. That night, from the safety of my living room, I sent 2 text messages. One to Sasha, my lead data architect. One to Ashwin, the wizard behind our machine learning pipeline. Sasha had been with me since the early pilot days at Tech. She could wrangle a messy data set like it owed her money and had a gift for making charts feel like storytelling instead of punishment. Ashwin was newer, but brilliant, quiet, precise, the kind of mind that found patterns where others saw chaos. The message was simple: I'm out. Tech is in play. If you want something cleaner, sharper, and worth your time, let's talk. NDA required. By Friday morning, both of their resignations hit HR. No overlap in phrasing. No coordination that could be legally pinned on me. Just 2 of the firm's top analysts vanishing into the mist, taking the institutional brain trust with them. Jard didn't notice. I know he didn't notice because he was too busy posting on LinkedIn. At some point during the day, he posted a selfie. Him at the office, sleeves rolled up, standing in front of a whiteboard full of buzzwords written in red marker. Caption: sometimes the best way to forecast the future is to create it. Leadership Data-Driven Vision 2025. I saved the post to my phone. Not because I needed proof, but because one day, when someone asked me what hubris looked like, I intended to show them that specific smile. I wanted to remember the controlled burn. I let the office stay quiet. I let the questions pile up. I let him scramble to fill holes he didn't even know existed. The detonation had already happened. He just hadn't seen the smoke yet. It started with a calendar nuke. I wasn't in the room, obviously. But corporate walls are thin and loyalties run deep. My friend in finance, who had watched Jard expense a $400 strategy dinner that was just him and a buddy drinking scotch, filled me in on every agonizing detail. Every executive at the firm got the same invite at 8:03 a.m. sharp. Subject: emergency debrief, Tech contract termination. Location: main boardroom. Attendance: mandatory. Jard showed up 10 minutes late. He walked in with his tie askew, lips pressed into that awkward, tight smile people wear when they think they can charm their way through a car crash. By then, the room was ice. The CEO sat at the head of the table. His jaw was tight enough to crack walnuts. Legal was there. Finance was there. Even the VP of HR was present, which only happened when someone was about to get eviscerated with plausible deniability. Jard shuffled to his seat, pulling out his sleek laptop. "All right," he started, breathless. "What's the—" The CEO cut him off by sliding a single sheet of paper across the polished wood. "Read it." It was Tech's formal termination notice. Effective immediately. Tech is ending all contractual engagements with your firm. We no longer believe your team aligns with our strategic direction. Any future collaboration is off the table. There was no "thank you," no "regretfully." It was cleaner than a guillotine blade. Jard blinked, reading it twice. This must be a misunderstanding. We just had a phenomenal meeting with them. Miranda loved the vision. The same meeting where you pitched ROI from an extrapolative model built on sentiment indexes and LinkedIn polls. The CFO snapped, not bothering to look up from his phone. Jard's eyes darted around the room. "I followed the numbers," he stammered. "I gave them a narrative." "What numbers?" the CEO growled. "We've lost $30 million, Jard. That account was half our Q1 growth projection. They didn't even ask to renegotiate. They cut us off like we were a phishing scam." "They must have misinterpreted," Jard said, his voice cracking. "I had full confidence in our deck. I can call Miranda right now. I can smooth this over." "Were we notified before the termination?" The CEO turned to the general counsel. "No," said the lawyer, a woman with the posture of a firing squad. "The letter came directly from Miranda Chen's office. No room for negotiation." She cited a fundamental lack of technical competence as the primary driver. The room went still. "You've got 5 minutes," the CEO said, his voice dangerously quiet. "Explain how this happened." Jard looked down at his laptop like it might whisper him an answer. He started clicking, opening folders, looking for anything to blame. Ping! A notification sound cut through the silence. A new email. Jard frowned, he clicked it. It was from me, or rather from my personal email address, scheduled to arrive at exactly this moment. Subject, read this first. He clicked the attachment. It was a PDF. It was my original report, the one he had called PowerPoint Fluff. But it wasn't just the clean version. It was the annotated version. It was time-stamped. It contained the real projections, the supply chain risk flags, the contractual vulnerabilities, and the strategic pivots tailored specifically to Tech's roadmap. And in the margins, it had his initials in the track changes. Comment from JT, too nuanced, needs more punch. Comment from JT, this section is too academic. Cut the risk model. Focus on the win. Comment from JT, delete this slide. Too much negative data. And then, my final comment at the bottom of the document, time-stamped 2 days before the pitch. Proceeding with your version as requested. Attaching original here for your records. Jard stared at the screen for 5 full seconds. He paled. He realized with horror that the CEO was standing behind him, reading over his shoulder. The CEO reached down and closed Jard's laptop. "So, let me get this straight," the CEO said, straightening up and walking back to the head of the table. "You ignored our lead strategist. You removed her from the pitch. You rewrote her material into LinkedIn bait. And now, we've lost our biggest client because you thought risk models were fluff." Jard opened his mouth, closed it, tried again. There was no defense. Just the hum of the HVAC system and the rustle of the HR director opening a folder. "Leave the room," the CEO said. "But—" "Leave the room." Jard rose. He was sweating through his silk shirt. He grabbed his laptop, but no one looked at him. No one offered a sympathy. See glance. As he shuffled out, stripped of his bravado, I imagine he wondered how it all crumbled so fast. But the truth is, it didn't crumble fast. It crumbled slow. It started the moment he dismissed what he didn't understand. And by the time the implosion came, I wasn't there to see it. The avalanche doesn't need the mountain to watch it fall. They never held a goodbye party for Jard. One Monday morning, his name simply disappeared from the org chart. By noon, someone in finance leaked that he had been transitioned out due to strategic misalignment. Just like that, the man who once called himself the future of the brand became a ghost. The board never mentioned him again. Not once. Not even in code. It was as if the CMO role had always been vacant. But the internet remembered. Because somehow, and I truly have no idea how, Scout's honor, his Cryon Tech pitch deck leaked onto a B2B satire blog. You know the one. The site that ranks bad corporate jargon like baseball stats. They ran a feature piece on it titled, "The Deck That Cost $30 million." Slide captions were highlighted in neon yellow with commentary that was absolutely savage. Synergy protocols. Is this a pitch or a Marvel villain origin story? Slide 14. If buzzwords could vomit, this pie chart would be the aftermath. Within 48 hours, the old firm's stock dipped 4%. Not catastrophic, but enough to sting. I heard through the grapevine that the new interim CMO is someone from internal compliance. Bless their soul. Legal is still working to untangle whatever non-compete spaghetti Jard left in his wake. Meanwhile, I was sitting in a soundproof glass conference room at Cryon Tech HQ. The view was different here. Cleaner. Sharper. Behind me, a whiteboard was covered in complex diagrams, real ones. Not a single synergy or paradigm shift in sight, just raw data, architectural flows, and hard strategy. Across the table, Sasha was sketching out a data pipeline overhaul on her iPad. Ashwin was debugging a prototype code block, humming quietly to himself. They looked tired, but it was the good kind of tired. The kind that comes from doing work that actually matters, for people who actually understand it. We were implementing the initiative on my timeline, with Miranda's full backing. I approved the first phase rollout with a signature on a tablet and slid it across the table. Miranda picked it up. She looked at the specs. She looked at the risk assessment I had insisted on including, the one Jard had deleted. She didn't smile. She didn't high-five me. She just leaned over, tapped her espresso cup gently against mine, and murmured just loud enough for only me to hear. Best fluff I ever invested in. We didn't laugh. We didn't need to. Outside, the sun was setting over the city, casting long shadows across the skyline. Somewhere back at my old firm, Jard's nameplate was probably gathering dust in a desk drawer that HR didn't know what to do with. He was likely updating his LinkedIn bio to consultant or visionary in transition. But me, I was exactly where I was always meant to be. Quiet, respected, unbothered. The war was over. The only sound left was victory, steeped in silence,